Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, preparing to check in on a couple of my worm bins that are due for a feeding. It's been 2 weeks since we last checked in on them, and the bins that I'm referring to are my now 224-day-old, that's 32 weeks, original Red Wiggler worm bins. So yeah, 2 weeks ago we gave them a whole bunch of carrot peel, a slightly different way of feeding than we normally do. I usually dig a little bit of a trench and then bury the foods. But on this occasion, we just laid out the carrot peel out across the top surface. We threw like a top covering piece of newspaper over it, and then we let the systems go. Over the past 2 weeks, I'm curious to see how they've done with that feeding, and my idea was to repeat a very similar feeding today, if it looks like it went over well. So let's get these systems up on the bench and get them fed. After all the shredded carrot peel was spread out across the entire top surface last time, it was covered with newspaper, and I was curious, somewhere between the really delicious carrot peel as well as all the very tempting moisture that collects on the plastic covering, somewhere between those things would be a spot that would definitely see a lot of worm traffic, and that's why I thought that these pieces of top covering newspaper being there, right in between the yummy carrot and the recirculating moisture getting caught on the plastic top covering, I figured these pieces of paper were doomed. But it seems to me like that, at least that one has held up pretty good. This one, sometimes I confuse the collection of castings on the top surface, which is what I think we're seeing here, and sometimes it's very easy to confuse that with holes that have developed, where you're just seeing right through the top covering paper and seeing the, oh boy, seeing the castings collection right below it. So I think I did kind of, put this piece of paper through a little bit more abuse than would have been necessary to simply collect it off the top surface and set it aside if the aim was to reuse it. And I think, you know what, I can't resist the, this one's easy enough, it's in great shape, it'll be easy to reuse it as a top covering, but that other one is going to be a little bit of a patchwork. So the whole idea with the last feeding being carrot peels was that it was a food item that I suspected would leave very little, if any, leftovers, especially after a 2-week interval. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing out here. The other thing that we often see out here is a lot of movement, but I've got to speed up the playback of the video so that you can see it, sometimes zoom in a bit, and what you end up seeing is all these little tiny things cruising the surface, and they're all snails, little itsy bitsy snails all across the top surface of both systems. Just by removing these top coverings, I saw everything that I had to see, and it made me decide, yes, I think they liked it, and yes, I'm going to give them a very similar feeding again. So last time it was all orange carrots. This time it's that white carrot as well. And when you combine these two in a soup, you don't need a whole lot more. It's just so delicious with those things only. And it's a little bit more than we added last time too, as far as overall amount. So it was kind of cool. I didn't know what to expect. I never feed that way. I never just place the food out across the top. I almost always dig a trench. I almost always bury it. And I think it's pretty cool. So last time it was pretty exciting, digging through the center where the feeding zone had been applied previously as a strip of food along the center. And we found lots and lots of worms hanging out there in the center, possibly still working down the food that had been left there for them. And we saw them in pretty big numbers, like big crowds of worms hanging out together. Now with the feeding spread out across the entire top surface, which was done intentionally, the whole idea was that there'd be a good number of worms everywhere in the material. Not only enjoying the carrot that they were given, but also as a result of going after the carrot, be spread out throughout the entire system. So the whole idea was we'd be able to also go into, just like we're seeing here. Last time I believe we dug through the outer edges and we found the areas to be a little bit desolate and lacking in worm traffic, but here clearly we're seeing good amount of worms everywhere, regardless of whether we check the center of the bin or the side of the bin. This is sort of similar to what we did last time too, in terms of just running through the whole system and aerating it. I figured we'd do the same again here today. Every now and then I do bump into a larger chunk of food, a little piece of corn cob in this case, and I'm just leaving those things whole. Let the worms continue at their own pace on something like that, but something like that's going to take them a very, very long time to break down, so don't expect that stuff to go anywhere as far as significant wear. That thing's going to be probably just, you know, separated from the worms and the castings, and well, more likely just kept with the worms as they get relocated into some new home, and they could just continue that delicious piece of food there in their new home. I guess I'm using this as an opportunity to not only verify the distribution of worms throughout the material, but just to get a sense of how the material looks and feels. There was actually two criteria in my mind before I decided with the carrots, and it was not only did they like the last application of it and the way it was applied. If so, then yeah, that's a good idea to repeat the feeding similarly this time. The second thing was moisture. I imagine something like this compared to, for example, pumpkin or, you know, something else that's got a lot of liquid content to it. To me, the peels of carrots, to me, just seem like something that's not going to bring with it any additional moisture, so that if the moisture content of the system is where I like it to be, which is where it is now in both systems, then I would be ashamed to throw something very damp in here and suddenly create a big muddy mess. It's not dry. Even though it all seems to crumble quite nicely, it's all got a really nice moisture content to it. Here too, I'm seeing a good distribution of worms throughout the material, which is precisely what I was hoping for. Because no matter where I look, there's always going to be a little piece of something that needs their attention. A little leftover scrap of shredded paper, cardboard, a little leaf stem, a little leftover food, whatever the case may be. I want the worms everywhere. I want them enjoying the entire environment, not being crowded into just the center. And then, yeah, there's a little bit of a spectacle to be seen when that's the case, because then you pretty much walk in on a population of worms that are still working down the remains of a previous feeding. But here, you know, deliberately we've attempted to get the worms spread out throughout the material, and if you ask me, it's worked. It's been confirmed just by looking through both systems, finding a good number of worms pretty much consistently everywhere, no matter where you check. So guess what? I'm feeding them the exact same way again, and at this point I think there's some sort of a nice round number. I think this is like feeding number 20 or something. If that's not the case, if I'm misremembering, I'll just flash something on the screen to correct myself if that was not true. But I guess we're going to simply do our best to split this pile of frozen material into two halves. Try to give each system a fair shake at the portion. A little bit more. I don't think too much more, but definitely more than we gave them last time. Some of the pieces seem bigger too. The stuff we gave them last time all seemed to be no larger than this little thing here, but the shreds of the carrot peel here seem a little bit bigger, a little bit thicker. I see celery too. I forgot that there was also celery in here. So this is a nice collection. I want to spread it out, but I do want to avoid getting it too close to the edges because my plastic coverings don't really reach out that far. And I do believe, you know, once again, due to their lack of moisture, material like this, as far as food goes, needs to be combined with a good amount of recirculating moisture, which you get under the plastic and you don't get so much around the edges where there's a good bit of airflow. I didn't really take the time to break this stuff up and loosen it and dislodge it from itself. So all that breaking up of the frozen together material has to happen here now in the process of spreading it out for the worms. And man, oh man, is my hand cold at this point. Freezing. But that's pretty much it for the feeding. As far as how I intended to apply it, I guess, you know, I've got my worm chow here too. Yet another nice and dry material, which we can give them a little shot of as well. Why not, right? Feed them well, make them happy, and then hopefully the material right beneath the tasty feeding also gets a good bit of their attention by being broken down into a much nice finer state. And then we can start thinking about harvesting their castings at some point soon, but not yet. There's still enough stuff scattered throughout it that I'd like to see it worked down a little bit better. So this system will probably be going for a few more weeks. My oldest systems are about 2.5 months older than these, and just yesterday I think it was that I started the migration of the worms out of their castings. So if these systems make it to about that same age before I initiate the depopulation of the material, then that's fine, but that's a way away. Quite a number of feedings if you ask me. So that's going to be totally gone. I'm sure both of these at this point are probably going to be totally gone. This one really did hold out good. Perhaps we'll see some scraps of it, but this one for some reason just seems like it's going to be a goner. Alright, so that's our feeding. That was a fun one. Kind of nice to look through the material and actually see the worms responding to your inputs. In this case, the input was something meant to drive them to the middle of the bin and spread out instead of mob in one place, and they did seem to do exactly that. And since they did seem to enjoy the feeding, I'm just going to go ahead and give them another one. That was my thinking. I don't know, would you have done the same? Seems like it's got a good chance of success. So that's it for the check-in, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.